Today with us we have Sara Doder, and we will discuss some of the unique challenges faced by Serbian youth, born or grew up in diaspora. It is especially interesting how all of that ties to professional life.
So my parents both left Sarajevo when the war began. My dad first, and then my mom. They weren't married at the time. They were dating, but not married. They met in Montenegro, married, or post during the war. They met up in Montenegro, married. Had me, and then I was born in Kotor. We lived in Eagle, Herceg-Novi, that area. When I was 3 in '97, we moved to Belgrade. We lived close to what's it called? St. Mark's Church, so Crkva Svetog Marka was kind of the area we lived in. And then when I was 4, so about 2 years later, 2.5 years later, Serbia, was bombed, as widely known. So after that, my family went through some economical struggles, and they started, looking at options of places to move. They knew they didn't want to move back, to Bosnia at that time. I'm sure the sentiment is very different now, but at the time they didn't want to. And we are actually originally pursued going to Australia, but were denied at the embassy. And then we looked at actually moving to Canada, and were denied at the embassy. And they said, we're just not taking any more refugees from former Yugoslavia. So somebody at the Canadian embassy gave my parents a contact for some woman that was working on cases of bringing people in, to the States at the U.S. embassy. So they went, they contacted her, they, whatever. We started the process. It took about 1.5 years or so. And then we came here. We did not get to pick where we were going to move. We didn't have any family in the States. So it was quite an adventure. And, at the time, I think this was probably, I don't even know if Google was a thing. I know Yahoo was. And I remember, my parents kind of looking it up and trying to figure out, where they were going. And so they were 32 at the time, and they were joking because there's a huge university here. And they said, the average age of the town is 27 when you take all the retired people and all the undergrad students. So they were very happy they were going somewhere young. But all jokes aside, we came here, and it was not great in the beginning. We didn't get to live in a nice neighborhood or a nice place. The organization that hosted us actually didn't even have a place for us to come. They put us in a 1-bedroom apartment, or not, I'm sorry, not a 1-bedroom. They put us in a studio apartment. We were there for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And then after that, we went into a house that, they set up for us. And though that first year was really hard, on accident, at my elementary school, there was some guy came inquiring. Turns out he was a Methodist priest. And what he was doing actually was he went to the school, and he was trying to figure out if they had kids that were disadvantaged that, might need some, not Christmas presents per se, but, that would need coats, shirts, anything. And someone at the school said, well, there's these 2 families that recently came. One family was from Ethiopia, I believe. The other family was us. And I think at least from what I gathered later on, was that the man went to the family that was from Ethiopia, and I guess they were like scared he was trying to convert them or something. So they said, no, thank you, we don't need anything. So one day, knocks on the door, my mom answers, he introduces himself, says why he's coming, why he came, and she, she invited him in, whatever, they had coffee. And the next day he returned. My mom's like, well, why are you here? And he goes, I don't know what you gave me. So by the way, I should say she made him Turkish coffee, right? So the next day he comes, and he's like, what it was in that coffee? He goes, I had to go to the ER because my heart would not stop going, which I thought was very funny. But anyway, he said no pressure. They invited us if we ever wanted to come. And he said, you don't even have to come to the service. You can come after the service. We always have potluck lunches, if you guys are just interested in meeting, just some the neighborhood kind of, but, no pressure. So by the time we went, probably already, well into December. It was before Christmas, but it was well into December. And my mom took us. My dad was working, but it was my sister and I. And Anna was 2. I was 8. My sister was 2. And my mom took us one morning, Sunday. And after the service, everybody came up to her and said, we would like to visit your home. We would like to visit your home. So my mom said, okay, well, come, whatever. She still had that mentality of, back home or, people are just randomly going to pop up whenever they want. So finally, some family put us in their car and, drove us like the couple of streets from the church to the house. And my mom realized that there was about 30 cars lined up all down the street. And when we got out, my mom opened the door and she whispered to me, she goes, "Oh my God, they all came at once." I was 8, so I didn't really know what she was talking about. Well, it turns out that these people were actually bringing furniture. When the priest came, he realized that we were sitting on like folding chairs. We didn't have any toys. I mean, it was nothing. It was like 3 months of being in the States. So, I guess he told them, his parishioners, and these people came and they started, opening up their trunks and unloading furniture and toys and Christmas trees and all sorts. I mean, anything you can think of, like from bedding to dressers and couches. It was crazy, but it was very nice of them. And so that was kind of, the first sort of, I guess I want to say friends we made here. Was kind of the first people we really got to know. Clearly never joined the church or anything, but, we just always kept friendly with them. So that was kind of, the beginning here. It was hard. I didn't speak English. I didn't speak a word of English, actually. And I was already old enough to realize that I didn't, understand or that I didn't speak. And it took about 2 years for me to feel comfortable to speak. And actually, before we started recording, I told you I was a little bit, socially awkward, even though I might not appear that way. And I think it actually stems from that, from the time I came here when I was trying to communicate. And even when I tried, kids are cruel when they're young. And, I would get made fun of and stuff, but it's okay. I've learned to speak and I'm okay now. So that's kind of the background story of, the first, I guess, couple of months here.
People often say kids are like sponges, but learning new language is not easy.
I will say this. So I speak to my parents in Serbian, strictly Serbian. My Serbian is so fluent that when I go back, if I'm in Serbia, they just think I'm from Bosnia. They can't tell that I live outside of the Balkans. So I've definitely retained my language. My sister has like the conjugation spadži. She has a little bit of an issue with that. So she's not as fluent as I am. But I think for me, it was whenever I wasn't reading for school in English, I would read in Serbian. When, I would listen to Serbian music. I hate TV, so I don't really watch TV. I can't say I used to watch Serbian TV or really any TV at all. But I think the reading and the music really helped me retain the language over time. Clearly, talking to my family, talking to friends, cousins, whatever. But I think because I passively listen to music so much, for hours on end when I'm working or studying, I actually think that was the key for me personally to kind of retain the language. But it's hard. I think it's hard for kids, and everybody kind of tries to do, what they think is right. And, I mean, I guess that's probably the best way to go for it, go with it. I'm not a parent, so I don't know. But I get a little bit annoyed with people when they don't know their native language. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Serbian, whatever their language may be. And I think the reason I get a little bit annoyed is I'm like, you have this great opportunity to learn another language, to know it, to really know it. It's not like you're learning out of a textbook, like to really know the language. And I think sometimes, at least what I've seen with my friends' parents, is they get frustrated of correcting their children, or the children get, frustrated from being corrected all the time. And it's hard. And you know what? I actually don't agree that kids are like sponges, because for some kids it is so hard to get it through their head for some reason. I don't know why. And it's not just, language, it could be anything. But that was definitely a thing. My sister, actually, when we moved here, she was 2. So, she was still learning how to speak. And after a while, my parents were like, this is too hard. Let her just talk whatever she wants, right? So she would understand Serbian, but she wouldn't speak it. And then I started babysitting her. And gosh, I was probably like 13 or so. I wasn't that old. And I mated one winter, I mated my goal to get her to speak Serbian. She didn't speak Serbian. She didn't eat any of our food. She was eating like fried food. That was the only thing she would only eat fried things, no soup, nothing. So I joke about the soup, but that was, like the most kind of traditional thing I could think of. But anyways, Anna, she refused to eat our food. She refused to speak the language. And I made it my goal to make her speak. So I was babysitting her and she was hungry and she went to the kitchen. She grabbed like Doritos or something. And I said, no, you can't have that. Mom made dinner. You can have, what she made. And she left for us. And my sister's like, well, I don't want to eat that. It was like schnitzel. She's like, I don't want to eat that. And I said, well, then you don't get to eat. So, that lasted about 30 minutes and then she ate the schnitzel and she was like, okay, that's fine. This doesn't taste that bad. So that was kind of the thing where I would not, she would talk to me in English and I wouldn't respond to her. And, it's frustrating getting ignored. So after a while, she would do her best. She wasn't very good at it, but she would do her best. And then, over time, it got better and better. And now she's pretty much fluent. Like I said, occasionally she has a conjugational issue, but it's not big.
In parents' desire that their kids speak their mother tongue, is importance of English sometimes underestimated? When is it too much?
Too much. That's a good question. I'm not a psychologist or, so I can't go too far into this, but I will say this thing. And I think, and I hope this doesn't offend you, but here's my thing. I think sometimes parents don't understand that, they are projecting their frustrations onto us. And one of those, let's say the language. Language is one of those frustrations, but is language really the root of the frustration? Probably, that they're feeling, probably not. And I think that puts a very big strain on the relationship between the parent and the child. I will say this, I don't have this issue personally, but I have noticed with my friends, their parents don't speak a word of English after 30 years here, 25, 30, 35 years here. They don't speak a word. And so it's imperative for the child to know both languages because they're an interpreter full time, whether it's doctor, grocery store, restaurant, anything you can, city hall, anything you can think of. The child has to know how to interpret for the parent. So I think when the price is, I think that's kind of the ultimate reason personally. I don't know if it's always, retaining just the language for patriotism or, for the sake of it. From the child's perspective, I can't say because I've retained mine. But I think it's kind of, I think it can be a really bad breaking point between, the child and the parent too, because it's, over time, so many things kind of start layering on, all the frustrations layer on over time. And I think that's a pretty big one, actually.
How is parents' weak English impacting their children?
So I think negatively. I think a lot of children are embarrassed of their parents, unfortunately. And I mean, they say, if you speak with an accent, it just shows that you're from somewhere else and, you've had to learn 2 or more languages. And that's very true. But I think until you're an adult, it's hard to understand that. And I think a lot of kids feel very, embarrassed by that. And I think, I don't know, I guess my first initial reaction probably would be to say that they're probably embarrassed, But so I had this conversation with my mom and just numerous people before too. Sometimes I get frustrated. I tell her, I'm like, hey, you can go take like an English. My mom speaks fine. She speaks well. It's just her accent's a little strong. So I always say, I'm like, why don't you go take a class? Like the community college, junior college, you can take a class like as a refresher. Like I should probably take a class as a refresher. In all honesty, I'm like, it's never bad to go back and relearn things. But for my mom, it was, 35 years ago that she was starting to learn English. So I said, why, just go take a class. Like, it's not a bad thing. You're working on yourself. And even if we're relearning something, I think it's important to continuously like work on ourselves, which is why I hate television and spend all my time reading, even if it's, something very random. So, what do I think? So I've said this before, like I said, to my mom and other people, I said, imagine, so, like my mom, you're from Sarajevo. So imagine an American going to Sarajevo, spending 30 years there, 27, like you have. And all they can say is, hi, buy, can I buy that bread, show it off the shelf? Like, what would you think of that person? If they're not able to go and pay taxes at the city hall, or they're not able to go to the doctor by themselves, or whatever, like, how would you feel? You'd probably think, something's wrong with them, or they're just not applying or trying to integrate into the culture that they come into. And that doesn't mean we need to lose our identity by any means, but I mean, being conversational, I think, is the bare minimum we can give. It's not enough to just show up somewhere and work. I think, you have to integrate into society. And I think I live in like I told you before we started recording, the town I live in is much smaller. So there's not a lot of, not just Serbs, but general people from former Yugoslavia that you can, speak to. So I think because of that, it's, I guess people are more like inclined to learn the language because they have to have some sort of social circle, outside of like whatever, 40, 50, 60 people. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's enough to just show up and work and that's it. I think it's an important part of, integrating into a society.
How is parents' level of integration influencing their kids' career choices?
Oof, that's a good one. Here's my thing, like my personal opinion of this. And actually I took some polls from, I don't know, like some followers on Instagram. So I was posting poll questions to ask them. And one of the questions, I think this is influenced by language and integration into society. Hold on, let me just find it. Sorry, give me just a second. So here's this question. And the reason I know why it's correlated is this. It says, was your field of study or career choice influenced by your parents? Yes or no? So I had 31 people respond. 23% said yes. 77% said no. So 7 people said yes, 24% no. So the people that said yes, so one of them is my cousin, the one I just told you about, that's studying engineering. Her dad's an engineer in Canada for like the last 30 years. My friend, let's see, 1, 2, 3. So every single person on this list is in the same exact field that their parents are in, which is, I was looking at the results before, but every single person on that list, the 7 people, their parents are in the exact same field that they are in now or are studying to be in. And why I think this is important is I think if you see your parents apply and do good at something, you're probably more inclined to kind of follow in their footsteps. And that's obviously not the general rule, but I think that's kind of more, you're more inclined to do that. So my parents didn't go to school here. They didn't finish university back home. They have fine jobs, they live well, but sometimes I find frustration in this because I think I'm like, there's so many missed opportunities for me to for you to help, for them to help me. And I get really frustrated with this sometimes too. And I'm sure I've said unfair things to them about this when I was younger, but I don't know. It's hard. It's hard. I think, seeing parents do well is great, but I also think that sometimes it's lost potential. I think that all these prior frustrations they had, they let them they let that negativity that they come from kind of eat them away more so than, integrating and applying themselves here. And that's not necessarily just language. That's, language, education, career choice, lots of things. And this is probably going too far, but I think it's also being scared of change. It's scary when you come somewhere new to then start everything else new all over again. Sometimes people, and everybody's a creature of habit, but, people fall into routines that see they're doing well. And so they're not inclined to do more than what they're doing well right now. Big deal. I mean, it's normal to have tension between the two. Nobody gets along 1,000% of the time. It's impossible. But I think taking into consideration kind of I guess, you can't expect more from someone else if you're their role model for the effort that's being put in.
What happens when kids are told that schools here are not as good as they were in Yugoslavia?
What do I think of that? I think a lot of that, actually. I think I think in general, a lot of I think there's kind of two things going on. One is either, you have the mentality of like, this is what you're supposed to do and this is what everybody does, or you want to do the opposite of, let's say, what your parents did, right? So with the school system, and this drives me nuts. I hear this a lot. Schools are not what they are back home or what they used to be back home or whatever, right? I don't think I'm any less educated than anyone else that went to school over there. As if with everything, you get what you put in, right? So the effort you put in is what you will learn. I mean, of course, you're not going to retain every single thing you learn in school, but really what you put in is what you're going to get out. I think a lot of kids are discouraged. So for example, my dad owns a trucking company, right? Sometimes I, help him with his books. I see what he earns. And, it would be nice to be 19 or 20 and have that sort of income, sure. But then you have to think, you got to do this for the next, 30, 40 years of your life. So is this really what you want to do for the next 30 or 40 years of your life? Is that what you really want to do? And I mean, there's great opportunity in it. If you've got a knack for business, you could grow exponentially. Like it could be great. But then you could also just be stuck working, for someone else. And it's kind of the same thing. Like I understand the appeal of going into the workforce kind of right away or very soon after, graduating or just going to community college. And I don't think there's anything wrong with choosing that path, but I also think it's choosing a harder path in life. And unfortunately, there's definitely people that don't value education. And I'm not saying that it's the only value measurement, for someone, far from it. But again, I think some parents don't necessarily value education as much, and it shows. It really does show, later on. And while you're in your 20s, while you're young, you can work two jobs. You have the energy, but once you're married, once you have kids, once you're going to be missing all the holidays. You're going to be, trying to find a babysitter to cover that gap, every 2-3 days that you have to do a double shift or something. And I think a lot of parents are to blame for that. I mean, you can't make somebody learn if they don't want to, but you also can't, at least you should not can't, but at least you should not discourage them from pursuing it. There's a lady that my mom works with, and she has she has 5 kids, and out of those 5 kids, only one went to college. And recently I was talking to her, a couple of months ago, I was talking to her, and, she said, wow, I'm so proud of you for starting your master's. And I said, thanks. And she goes, oh, I wish my kids would have gone to school. I wish all of my kids would have gone to school. Well, some years ago when her kids were of age to start college, she said, oh, I was kind of like, you can do whatever you want, but wouldn't it be better to work and, save money and buy a house? Had they gone to school, they probably would have, had some loans, sure, but probably, would have attained that house heck of a lot quicker than, being 18 and, working minimum wage. So, I don't think any work, if it's legal, is bad work, or it's, not so every member is, valued in society for a reason, but I still think education is important. It's important for self-growth, if nothing else. I had a very serious argument with my mom about this. And it goes back to the whole language thing, where it's not enough to just show up. Like, I really, truly believe it's not enough to just come somewhere. It's not enough just to provide a roof over your child's head. Like, those are things that are just expected of you. I mean, if you see a stray cat that has kittens, she's going to find them shelter, right? So I think it's a lot of trauma that people carry with them, and they project it, unconsciously, or subconsciously. That's what I'm trying to say is So they don't project this trauma on purpose onto their children, but it's there. It's there. And then I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, that's kind of the excuse, why they're not moving forward, why they're not doing something that they know they should be doing. Oh my goodness, a friend of mine, her dad won't quit smoking. He has lung problems, and he won't quit smoking. And finally, she was like, "You have to stop. The doctor told you, we like everybody's telling you." And her dad goes, "Oh, I'm still stressed from the war." And like, what do you say to that? Maybe he's trying to be funny about it, or maybe he's not trying to be funny about it. I don't know. But I think that trauma that's carried around is detrimental to relationships and to the growth of the new generation. And it's also used as an excuse, in all honesty. I know with our culture, with the Serbian culture, it's very taboo. Going to therapy, talking to someone, even writing in a journal is like not something, people really do. But I think at one point we have to choose to let the trauma go. That's what I think. And then it, once you heal, I think that could help, not just your parent, child relationship, but in general, it's that saying, hurt people. So
What would be your advice to parents?
advice, I think that, what you expect of your child, you should expect of yourself. I don't think it's fair that your own shortcomings are projected onto children. Like, when I say I don't mean yours, Tanya, but just in general.
Of course.
The parents, I think that their shortcomings are projected onto their children. And sometimes they have these unrealistic expectations too. Every child has to be a doctor, every child has to be a lawyer, every child has to be an engineer. And there's nothing bad in that, for having those aspirations, but you can't expect that of them. They're their own person. You can help them, you can guide them, you can, push them when they need the help to push, but don't push them to the point where they hate it, or they resent you. So I actually, there's a Serbian girl who went to law school and then decided after she was done to become an what's it called? The people that do like the facials, esthetician. Mm-hmm. I mean, can you imagine all those years of education? And she was good, but she goes, I hate it. I hate it because it was just so pushed onto me. I don't know. I think really that, personifying your own shortcomings is not the answer to get, to have a good relationship with your children, to get what you want out of them. But many people, they don't even, care what their children study as long as they study, right? But then there's definitely others that are, I mean, they're a minority, but there's definitely others that are like, contribute to the household. I don't know. That kills me.
What would be your advice to kids of not well-integrated parents?
Tell them to stop enabling them. Next time they have a doctor's appointment, say, hey, I'm sorry. I mean, unless it's like life or death, but, just be like, hey, sorry, I'm busy, I'm working, I have something going on, I can't. And, hey, your phone has Google Translate. The doctor can talk into it, translates right into Serbian, vice versa. I know that that's maybe cold, but I really think that enabling is a really big part of the issue. I know for me, I mean, not that my parents ever really said anything about it, but I'm sure that they had other plans for me for my undergrad. I studied international relations, which are, to people who don't know what international relations are, it's very difficult to explain it. So, my dad was kind of trying to push me to, study like some sort of software engineering or something, which is his passion. And then, my mom was just, she didn't really state an opinion. I think she was just kind of siding with my dad. And, I started college. I was undecided that first year. I started college and I didn't do well. That first semester I didn't do well and I was so unhappy. And then I went to them and I said, hey, although I have to preface this with, I'm very strong-willed. So what I want is what happens in general. But anyways, I went to them and I said, hey, I'm sorry if this is going to disappoint you, but I won't be what you want me to be. I want to do something that I want to do that's going to make me happy, that's going to fulfill me. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions I've made in my life. I got so much out of that. And it's just, sometimes you have to do things that are going to make you happy. And so back to my questions. One of the questions I asked was, I just want to make sure I get the verbiage right. I said, do you ever feel held down or repressed by traditions? Any kind of traditions, right? Including the expectation of our parents. I had 30 people respond altogether. 13 said yes, 17 said no. The people that said no some of them are actually second generation here, and third, so like their parents were born here as well. And I think that those expectations like kind of dwindle down, as generations are more integrated here. But the ones that said, yes, we do, they're all first generations. They all came here, like I did. And I don't know, it's hard. It's very hard. But I think enabling parents to have this projection on you is probably the number one thing I would tell them, is stop enabling it, right?
What is your view on influence of tradition?
One is the religion. I mean, not everybody's religious, that's fine. But I feel like there's a revival of religion now, especially with people who come here, when they're very new, because, communities gather around churches, right? So it's a good way to kind of socialize, with your own people, with this, people that have the same sort of values and language and whatever that, as you do, right? They're your people. They're, you know who they are. So it's easier to, kind of forge relationships with them. And then also that's exactly what also slows down the integration into kind of Western society as well, right? Because all your time is spent with the same group of people that are exactly like-minded, like you are as well. So some things that I've noticed is definitely, there's kids who don't want to go to church, are forced to go to church. That's one thing. That's a big one. I think dating is an interesting one too. There's this, I mean, not that I don't personally deal with this, but there's definitely the whole, who you are allowed to date, what, where this person can be from, what religion can they belong to, what culture do they belong to, that kind of thing. Like, those are some very unrealistic expectations. I think a lot of young people kind of, once they're of age and they start moving out, they feel so repressed by just those two things that they, go off and they'll, sometimes they'll date people maybe they don't even care about necessarily, but they do it just to kind of annoy their parents, to get under their skin, which is horrible, but it happens. Or thing I've seen is some kids end up staying in the church and being on the board and really enjoying teaching folklore, teaching, cooking classes, like all sorts of things, participating in festivals. And then there's, the flip coin of it where they'll never go again. And sometimes I don't know if it's like disinterest in the church. I think it's just feeling repressed, and once you kind of break free of that, I guess it's nice. I don't know. I don't have that sentiment. So I can't say I understand it fully, but I can at least attempt to understand it. I think respecting free will, not to go on a tangent, but I hate when I see people when they talk to little kids, like toddlers, what looks like a baby voice. It's still a human being. It's still a person, and it's hard to find, kind of fight back that that I guess, the desire to treat everybody kind of in their age group. But I really think respecting free will, my accent's coming out. I think respecting free will is really, really imperative to growth, to and I'm not going to sit here and I don't know, quote Dostoevsky to a 2-year-old, but still treating that child, whether they're 2, 5, 10, 15, I don't, it doesn't matter. I think respecting their will, get a babysitter for a couple of hours if need be, Sundays, or, a family friend to watch them for a couple of hours. Like, it's not, sign them up for soccer in that same time slot. You don't have to be there, that kind of thing. But I think just respecting free will is really important. I'm not saying, no, I'm not saying give up, and I'm not saying give in every single time, but I just think, if they really don't want to go, you don't know what's bothering them. It's not just sleeping in. I mean, sometimes there's things that bother them and they don't want to talk about it. I also think it can be made fun, there's Sunday school, like make them watch the little kids. Just kidding. Don't do that. Then they really won't come. But I don't know. I think respecting free will is important.
What if kids always say no?
I'm not saying give up, but you're still a parent. You have to be firm with them. I'm a little bit of a disciplinarian myself, but there's just, I think there's a fine line between like tolerating and then, making someone do something. I get them involved in activities. It's not just, go stand for 2 hours. It's, get them involved. Like, there's things they can do that, that'll make it fun for them. I think it's good to have limits, mostly for the well-being of the child, I guess, of your child, like, even your adult child. I think it's good to have limits. I mean, if you repress them, again, they might act out just to do it. And that was actually one of the questions I asked, and I got 30 answers back. And I said, do you strictly date, or if you're, married, have dated within the community or outside too? And so these are all, Serbian people that answered, and 15 said yes. 11 said no. So out of that 15, 6 or 7 were married. I don't remember off the top of my head. We're married. I can answer personally. I prefer dating within the Serbian community, even if it means, maybe going somewhere, driving a couple hours in a direction, because for me, it's easier to relate to people that are Serbian, to guys that are Serbian. It's easier for me to relate. But also, as I've gotten older, and probably, more integrated into this culture myself, I said I just care that they're Orthodox. Again, because I think at the end of the day, it's sharing the same kind of common values that's important. At least to me, it is, so that's kind of where I've personally gone with it, where, first it was like, it just has to be Serbian. It's mostly because I met someone that's Orthodox, but not Serbian. He's American Orthodox. But anyways, it's I don't know. It's hard, how can you tell someone who to be with? But then again, I also understand why you would want to influence your child's decision of who they're going to be with. I'm not a parent, so I can't give advice. Like, for my sister, who's 6 years younger, I would love to see her with us. Choosing to just date Orthodox guys doesn't negatively impact anyone else. I'm not doing anything bad, right? So it's okay to have your preferences. I mean, that's normal. But, I too don't think that we're superior. I just find that there's a common ground. This kind of goes back, I should have brought this up earlier. So one thing that I thought was really interesting, and the question that I got the most answers for, that I posed was, do you make it a point to tell someone where your family is from or not in the first conversation? So the overwhelming number was no, which really surprised me. But I also had my sister answer these questions. I answered them, and then I had, so it was random, right? I was trying to make the polls as fair as possible, but I had 2 girls that are sisters answer the questions. And what I thought was really interesting was that the younger one answered, no, I don't make it a point to tell people. Just like my sister answered, no, I don't make it a point to tell people. Versus the older one answered the same way I did, which was, yes, I do make it a point to tell people. So when we, we were messaging earlier a couple of days ago, I told you how I told one of my friends about this. So the girl that said, yes, I do make it a point to tell people where I'm from is my friend Nina. Her parents are from Sarajevo. She was born and raised in Canada, in Toronto. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, she was, visiting her grandparents in Sarajevo. And, whatever, she was there for the summer and she met a guy. I guess they went out a couple of times, whatever. And, as time progressed, she went back in the winter. She saw him. she told her parents she was interested in bringing him to Canada. They said, absolutely not. You know, you're 22. They said, absolutely not. You're 22. You're not getting married at 22. That's not how this works. So, you know, you've seen this guy like, you know, a handful of times in a span of like 6-7 months. So she said, okay, can I go to Sarajevo? And they said, sure, you know, you can go to Sarajevo, but you have to find a job. You can't just go there. We're not gonna, you know, support you. You have to go there. So she went and she found a job, or I think she actually found the job before she went. She worked for a Canadian company. And they dated for about, I don't even know, like 2 years, and then he proposed and they got married. And she just recently made her way back to Canada with him. But I thought that was so funny because knowing myself, that's probably something I would do too, versus my sister who would not even consider it, you know. And she's had plenty of opportunities to come back and to travel, you know, over there, but she's just like, she has no desire, you know, no pull to it. And so I don't know, I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, the people that said yes, I make it a point, you know, to tell people where I'm from, or also the people that I know that are a little more, I guess, prone to following traditions and are, all of them, I think, except like one person came here, was not born. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and I don't know. It's a lot. I think, you know, gosh, each episode could just be one topic. Yeah, I don't know. Anna was young though. She was 2 when she came here, and so for me, I went to daycare I went to daycare in Serbia. I finished my first grade in Serbia. Not a lot, but I finished my first grade, and I still have friends that I went to daycare with and that I started school with. And one of those friends actually came to visit me. She spent about 10 days here. Or no, she spent a week. She spent 7 days here. She spent a week here. So I have connection, like I'm close to my cousins. For about 5-6 years, I used to go every summer. I'd go in the winters. So I don't know. I think I was just better at, you know, kind of forging relationships. And I mean, I had relationships over there to begin with, you know, versus her that, you know, oh, these are your cousins, hanging out with them. That's different. That's difficult, right? It's difficult to kind of just put 2 people together and expect them to have a relationship right away.
Do children of immigrants, and especially perhaps Serbian, feel that there are limitations in their career choices?
I think so, yes. I think it's absolutely an issue. Because, okay, so you said politics, right? So that's exactly what I studied. And even from professors, oddly enough, even from professors, I faced some really nasty comments, you know, pertaining to where I'm from and where my family is from. And that used to drive me nuts. But then I got over it because I can't. So that's actually exactly what has inspired me to hopefully one day get a PhD and then be a professor myself, because I think more than parents discouraging, I think that's what's discouraging is having, you know, people have these notions of you because of where you're from or what ethnic group you belong to, and that drives me nuts. So I hope that one day I can, you know, encourage kids, say, you know, go be free. You can do anything you put your mind to. No, I don't think it's an issue. Like you said, you know, that don't have self-confidence. You know, I think if we put our mind to something, it's doable. You know, when I finished my bachelor's, I think it was the most underwhelming feeling I've had in my life, because I was like, all this work, what do I do now? You know, that was kind of my sentiment. I think we're slowly moving away from parents negatively influencing their children, if you will, mostly because, you know, people that are my generation. So like I was born in 94. So, you know, 90 to 94, 95 are now becoming parents. And then, you know, they'll eventually start, you know, influencing their kids. And then those that were, you know, young, like let's say 10 or so when the war started, I mean, their kids are now starting, you know, university. And I think their mentality is still different than those of you know, born in the 70s or the 60s, you know, like my parents were. So I don't know. I just think that people that came here younger are better integrated than those that came later. And, you know, when you're 20, you know, 4, 5, 6, you're not the same as when you're 40. And I think that, you know, slowly we're, you know, I mean, clearly as people age, you know, new kind of generations are coming into consideration. And so I think because of that, it's less, there's less discouragement going on now, or I guess less encouragement, if you will. You know, they're going to maybe, you know, or at least that's what I've seen and what I think too, is that, you know, as these new kids start going off to college and choosing careers, they are going, you know, they're getting influenced less and less by their parents, because a lot of the kids that are starting now, I mean, overwhelming majority that I've met have already, you know, their parents have gone to some sort of school here too. So